Welcome into the Behind the Wall pregame show. I am your host, former Penn State offensive lineman Landon Tangwall. We are live here at Campus Stakes, downtown State College on Pew Street. Campus Stakes and I are doing a toy drive, Toys for Tots, Christmas season. So if you guys bring a toy into Campus Stakes, you will get 20% off your meal. So stop by Campus Stakes this weekend and in the future if you are in town. It's snowing in State College right now. Man, it was coming down earlier. And look, we're still in November. So a lot of talks, obviously, about us having a home playoff game. We could have a whiteout with snow in there on December 21st. And I think if we take care of Maryland, that's where we are at right now. And let's get into Penn State's playoff situation, where we stand at the moment. And I think an interesting question to ask, too, is Ohio State and Michigan play each other this weekend. If Michigan somehow finds a way to beat Ohio State, we would end up in the Big Ten championship against Oregon. Now, I don't know if I actually want to do that. I mean, there's a couple things. Then you have to go play the number one team in the nation. And, obviously there's the conversation of and anytime you have an opportunity to go win a title, a conference title, you obviously want to take that. So I think we are rooting at the end of the day for Michigan. But as far as the playoff landscape of where we are, I think it's a lot more favorable to be the 5th, 6th, or even 7th seed of where we sit at the moment instead of possibly going to the Big Ten title game. And then who knows? If you get blown out by Oregon in the Big Ten title game, I think there's even more questions after that of where do you really stand? Is this an elite team? Can they hang with the big boys? So I just think it honestly invites more problems. Then the guys don't get an extra week off. So there's that. It's more punishment on the body because promise you the guys are excited. They're looking forward to after Maryland when you get 2-3 days off. You never get too many days off as a college football player. But those few days that you get at the end of the season, right when it ends and before bowl games and now the college football playoffs, it's a different type of feeling. So that's an interesting conversation to have. But nonetheless, Penn State right now sits at the number 4 team in the college football playoff rankings, which is kind of ironic. The first year we go from a 14 playoff to a 12-team playoff, Penn State is inside the top 4 teams. And so where we sit, in reality, we would be the number 6 seed, which would be the second highest rated non-conference winner. It's because seeds 1 through 4 get a automatic bye. And so that is the highest rated conference winners. The loser of the Big Ten championship game is most likely going to go to the 5 seed. And then that would leave us at the 6 seed where it all stands right now. Now, Notre Dame, there's some push around the media, around the college football playoffs. Notre Dame is currently at 7. They are 1 behind Penn State. And Notre Dame early on, they had that loss to Northern Illinois. That was a bad one. That was back in week 2. And Northern Illinois is a middle-of-the-pack MAC team, so not even a Power 4 team. And they upset Notre Dame at Notre Dame. And I think that's obviously something that the committee is going to take into consideration. But Notre Dame has been red hot as of recent. So you also have to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there where you can get better throughout a season, but you still have to punish them a little bit for messing up against probably the worst team on their schedule all year. It's hard to forgive, but nonetheless, they are doing really well. But you compare our losses, we both have 1 loss. Our loss is to the number 2 team in the country in Ohio State. Their loss is to a really bad MAC team. So I think nonetheless there you can kind of cut your ties and say, hey, that's fair to keep Penn State above Notre Dame. And so the playoff committee actually took questions from the media, which I think is pretty neat. No entity of the NCAA would ever, referees or NCAA chairman would ever hold press conferences, but the college football playoffs did do it. And so Ward Manuel of the college football playoffs is one of the chair members, and he was asked about if Notre Dame could jump Penn State and what he's looking for. And he acknowledged everybody's record. He acknowledged Penn State's top wins. He acknowledged Notre Dame's top wins. And it's like, okay, that's cool. And he said, we're going to be watching tightly. He said, he also said, I know Notre Dame obviously lost to Northern Illinois and Penn State was to Ohio State, but we are going to watch this weekend. Notre Dame has USC. which is kind of an interesting situation with Notre Dame having USC because we played USC already once this season, and it went to overtime. And we remember it was everybody's heart was bouncing out of their chest after that game. But now Notre Dame gets to face a little bit of a different USC type of team of where they are compared to week 5 when we played them to now. Very different team. Miller Moss is no longer their quarterback. The fan base really wants Lincoln Riley gone. So there's a couple of different things that are going on, but still it's a USC team that has a long-standing tradition against Notre Dame. And so I think they're going to bring everything they got, but it's just not as good of a USC team. They don't have anything in front of them. The only thing they're playing for is to spoil Notre Dame's playoff hopes, which can be dangerous at times, but it's definitely not something that I think if they don't blow USC out of the water, they don't have too much to talk about jumping over us into the 6th spot. Joe asks, if we get another shot at Ohio State, do you think we will take care of business this time? They're a good team. And look, at the end of the day, I don't think they would change up their scheme or what they did. Especially, they were more dominant. They were a little bit stronger up front than Penn State. And then on the flip side of that, they shut down Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren was double teamed and shut down. Still had 80 all-purpose yards and was getting around the field, but they still took him away in the passing game. They blanketed him, and then Ohio State has Caleb Downs, who I think is the best safety in America. So, and I don't know if I'd have that same statement if KJ Winston was healthy, but unfortunately he is not. But I would love to have seen what KJ Winston and Jalen Reed, that tandem back there, would look like this year. Obviously we had it a little bit last year, but I think KJ Winston was going to take a major step up from where he was last year. And honestly, Penn State's kind of been hit by the injury bug this year. It hasn't been great for us with Nick Singleton really getting banged up, was out for a decent chunk of time. Obviously Drew Aller fought through his thing, but KJ Winston, Anthony Donko, and Alonzo Ford all really, one I think is the best player, would have been the best player on the team in KJ Winston. And then Donko is the best offensive lineman. And then Alonzo Ford was really coming on strong, especially in the run game. And you look at Zane Durant, he does a great job at defensive tackle in the run game. But outside of that, Penn State struggled. And that's kind of where they got pushed around against Ohio State, was at defensive tackle in the run game. And Alonzo Ford really started to step up. He goes down with an injury last weekend and seems to be out for the year. Coach Franklin said long-term. So obviously a long-term injury, the end of the season, is not ideal. So Penn State has been hit by the injury bug. Now, can you overcome it? And also, their tight end number 2, Andrew Rappelier. A lot of people don't remember because Luke Reynolds has really came onto the scene these past couple weeks. But our number 2 tight end was, after West Virginia went down for the season. So injury bug has been all over the place, but we continue to fight. And honestly, while we're talking about Luke Reynolds, he definitely deserves a shout out. He played a big role in that fake punt against Minnesota last week. And I think it was something that, it was cool. Coach Franklin getting obviously a lot of credit for the call. And I think Dom Ruley deserves most of the credit. He was the one out there. And we actually sat down with Dom Ruley on the Player Show on Monday night. And it was interesting. It wasn't a fake that was just called. They didn't just call the fake and say, this is what we're running. Dom Ruley came up to the line as the personal protector of the punter. Those are those 3 guys that stand about 4 or 5 yards in front of the punter, and looked at the lineman up front. And Dom Ruley said, all right, we're going to run the fake. And so he gave the call up front that we're running the fake, and they went with it. And everybody blocked that fake punt up to perfection, from the guys in the back to Riley Thompson selling the fake. I think a lot of Nittany Nation had a heart attack thinking there was a little bit of a errant snap there by Penn State, but nonetheless a ballsy call by Penn State all around. I do want to talk about Maryland for a second here. We'll talk a little bit more college football playoffs, but you guys know I always give a story time from when I either played against the team or I was recruited against the team we are playing. So I have obviously some really good Maryland stories being from Maryland. So Chop Robinson and me grew up playing against each other in Maryland. We went to all the All-American games together. And so Chop obviously ended up going to Maryland. I went to Penn State. And after that, we play week 1. And I get in the film room on Monday and I see that Chop Robinson plays outside linebacker. So he's dropping into coverage. And I'm like, that can't be right. Why is Chop Robinson? He's a 5-star defensive end. Why are you dropping Chop Robinson into coverage? And so I'm like, all right, whatever. So we play the game, and I'm watching Chop the whole time because he's going against the left tackle, and that's obviously my position. And I only see him rush the passer 2-3 times max. And so I hit up Chop after the game, and I say, hey, man, you why are they not putting your hand in the dirt? You need to be rushing the passer. Come out to Penn State, and we need a defensive end because this was Arnold Ebiketie. He came in from Temple. And AK was having a great year, but we knew that AK was going to leave. So we're like, hey, we need to replace AK with a similar transfer. And I would argue Chop was better than Arnold Ebiketie. And so I'm staying on Chop, and I'm like, hey, bro, we're going to talk more and more as the season goes on. It was already kind of towards the end of the season. And so I let Coach Pry know. Coach Brent Pry at the time was the defensive coordinator, and he was obviously all behind it. I mean, we were trying to get Chop Robinson. Penn State was throughout his recruitment. But we just obviously didn't get the job done. He wanted to stay home. There may have been, maybe some money at home at the time when there really wasn't supposed to be money. Who knows? Stuff like that happens. But so I stay on Chop. He comes in for a visit, and next thing you know, we lock it up. And Chop wanted to come to Penn State. He shut it all down. And really just a classic. I mean, that kind of like sums up Maryland. That you would take. I mean, think about as a fan, you've watched Chop Robinson for 2 years play at Penn State and be so disruptive. It's only fitting that Maryland would have put him at outside linebacker and made him try to cover tight ends and wide receivers and whatnot. So very Maryland of them up to this point. So Maryland's coming in this game 1-7 in the conference. Not good. They are lacking quite thoroughly at this point. Last week against Iowa, they only had 227 yards of total offense. So just struggling, can't move the ball very well at all. And then their starting quarterback, Billy Edwards Jr., got hurt, and he has been hurt all year. He's kind of been in and out, and it's kind of at that point where if you're Maryland, do you really want to play an injured quarterback? Where we sit right now, no one knows who's going to be the starter for Maryland this weekend. I don't know how much that really matters when you are 1-7 in conference play. Do you really want to use an injured quarterback that has led you to 1-7? I don't really think that's someone that's flourishing in your offense at that point. So I would expect to see MJ Morris. He is a backup, a little bit more of a dual threat quarterback. So when he came in last week for Billy Edwards against Iowa, he threw 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So kind of sporadic all over the place. And look, I mean, for me, this Maryland team it's similar to Purdue. I think Purdue was probably take away Kent State. Purdue was the worst team we played this year. I think Maryland is a close second at that point. So we should be able to get some swagger going to the playoffs, and that does mean something. So, like, if you come out of this game and you're Penn State and you only win by 10 points against Maryland, that absolutely has an effect on how you feel going to the playoffs, like what type of swagger you have and how confident you are that, say, the offense can pass the ball down the field, and that's something that they've struggled with. Well, here's an opportunity against a Maryland defense that has really struggled all year against quarterbacks that want to air it out against them. So, can we get that going? Because that's something that I've been talking about for pretty much every single game, every single pregame or postgame show. I'm asking, hey, can we get the wide receivers more involved? And more specifically, can we get Trey Wallace involved? Because I've said over and over again, you've seen it. Trey Wallace is the guy that will make the plays, and he's the most talented wide receiver, clearly, out there. And so you look around and it's like, okay, we got some other guys that can make plays. And look, I mean, early on in the season, Coach Franklin, we had through the first 5 games, we had a 100-yard receiver in every game, and it was a different receiver every single game. And people were happy with that. But I kind of said at the time, hey, the problem is when you need someone to step up, and we saw that against Ohio State. Yeah, you can have wide receiver by committee that works, but does it work against great teams? No. That is where you start to struggle because you need guys to separate. And we saw Trey Wallace try his best. And look, I mean, I think people got a little bit of bad taste in their mouth with the whole Trey Wallace end zone pick situation against Ohio State. it really wasn't Trey Wallace's fault. It was a really nice back shoulder ball from Drew Aller. But I mean, the defensive back knocked down Trey's hand at the last. I mean, it was beautifully done by the Ohio State defensive back. And still, though, you think this season, hey, what wide receiver has went up and made a catch? Everyone you're thinking about would have to be Trey Wallace. And it hasn't been a ton in the past weeks. I will say that. He obviously, and I say that, that's why I say we need to get Trey more targets. And hopefully this is similar to the Purdue situation where we have the starters out pretty much by halftime, third quarter, that type of thing. And if you do that, I would force feed Trey Wallace the ball a little bit. Give the ball to Trey, give the ball to Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren is obviously going to get his touches. And I will tell you, Tyler Warren made a really selfless move last week and was the smart move. When he caught that 4th and 2 ball to ice the game, he could have turned up and scored a touchdown. Now, Penn State was only up by 1, so that would have been a fatal mistake. That would have been Indiana 2020 all over again. Shout out my boy Devin Ford. Much love for you. But I'll never forget as a recruit, and it was like COVID, and I was watching the Purdue game, and I could not believe. So at that time, when you get a first down, and if you get the first down and you win, you can ice it and just kneel it out. We have a call. It's called surrender. So everybody's given this. It's called surrender. And so that means get the first down, get down. Tyler Warren did a great job of doing that. If he would have scored that receiving touchdown, he would have broken Pat Fryermuth's receiving touchdown record for most touchdowns scored by a Penn State tight end. So he did not get the record. He is still tied with Pat. He needed that to pass him. So Coach Franklin came out in the press conference and said, hey, good things happen to people that, give back and put the team first. So I think that was Coach Franklin's way of saying that Tyler Warren will most likely get a touchdown reception this weekend. And I'm sure they will try to get him that ball. But Tyler Warren continues to be the best player on the field every time he's out there. And I am surely glad he is on our team. David said, thoughts on Penn State running majority of plays as 2 tight end sets, throwing more to Dinkins and Reynolds. I mean, hey, look, that's a real conversation to have, is to put Dinkins or Reynolds in the slot wide receiver position. Because at the end of the day, it's like, hey, if you haven't gotten much production at all, and if that's on Penn State, I mean, they need to look at the stats and, hey, what type of production, what type of win rate are we getting from our slot wide receiver? And look, I mean, Caden Saunders was supposed to have a big year. He's been injured all year. I think that hurt a lot. He was my favorite in the slot, guy that would really create separation and look good in the spring game. Just Drew Aller missed him once or twice, actually, I remember. And, Drew has looked a lot better, honestly, since. I remember the spring game happened, and it was a really windy day, and people were trying to attack Drew Aller, and he has come out and really kind of shown who he is this year. And I think he could benefit. I mean, look, we've seen Luke Reynolds and what his ability is out there. I've given the George Kittle comparison. So if you just go watch Luke Reynolds play a little bit of football, it might be the dirty blonde hair, it might be the 85, but the way he moves, his mannerisms are George Kittle to the T. It's pretty spectacular. And let's continue on our offense while we are on it. Jay said Tyler Warren should be our only red zone fade option. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm going to be honest. And I think we should give him more opportunities. Give Tyler Warren as many shots, jump balls as possible. Because how many, I mean, you think about it, we don't do it that often, and it works most of the time. Like Tyler Warren has a ton of success, whether it's someone glued to him and we throw him like a tight back shoulder, or it's, a true jump ball. He wins a lot of those. So I don't disagree with you guys either there, Jay. Make sure you guys leave any comments or questions below. I am live on YouTube, on Twitter, and actually on Facebook too. We went ahead and added that on, so I was glad to do that. And love going live here. We are live at Campus Steaks right now at the moment, so you guys need to come through. We got the toy drive going on, so if you bring in a toy that we will be giving away to some children in need around State College, you get 20% off your Campus Steaks meal. Check that out. Just Joe says the easiest road to the Final Four for PSU is for Miami and Ohio State to win out, including conference championship games. Miami will be the easiest opponent amongst the top 4 seeds. Yeah, I mean, look, if everything kind of goes to plan at the moment where we are at, we are the 6th seed. We will play 11, who could be it could be a ton of different teams. It could be Arizona State. It's probably not. Indiana's probably going to be 10 just because of the way ACC and Big 12 are kind of shaping up. But nonetheless, if the playoffs start today, I think we would have one of the most favorable routes outside of the 5 seed. Ohio State would have a cakewalk where they would get to play the 12 seed, which is the 5th highest rated conference champion winner that gets an automatic bid. And then they play the 4 seed, which would probably be Boise State. So that would be unfair. I would be mad if Ohio State had that good of a road, but we would be close. Let's say we had an Arizona State and then Miami, because Miami would probably be the 3 seed. That's favorable. I would love to play those 2 teams back to back in the first 2 rounds. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it is the college football playoffs. You're going to play good teams, but if you can play your first 2 games and it's favorable matchups, I'd be down for it. Gators fan says, your thoughts on losing edge rusher Jaden Woods to Florida? Yeah, look, I mean, obviously it's not ideal, and he was the best player in this 2025 class. Woods was, so that hurts. Now, I will say the good news about this: Max Granville he reclassified from the 25 class to the 24 class and has had some playing time this year for Penn State at defensive end. So that is good that we've kind of started to get him going in that situation. And then we got a couple other commits, obviously, LeVar Arrington Jr., then we got Deshaun Bennett, Cortez Harris, and a couple other guys. So some possible big-time playmakers. I think we'll be all right, but nonetheless, when it's your top recruit in the entire class decommits, it sucks. And I'm sure if Florida took him away, obviously he decommitted from Penn State and went to Florida. Sure, NIL had to play at least a little bit of a role in that. It had to have. There's no way it didn't. NIL is buying folks out. You look out at Michigan, and they just bought Bryce Underwood. And then Dave Portnoy, the owner of Barstool Sports, came together with Larry Ellison, who's known as one of the most wealthy men in the entire world. His wife is a diehard Michigan fan. So Larry Ellison's wife and Dave Portnoy came together. They talked with some of the Michigan staff and said, hey, we're ready to put up whatever we need to win this year. And Bryce Underwood, he's going to make $11 million. That's kind of the report of around about where they were at. And it's like, all right, well, I mean, how far off are we from that happening at more places? Super fans just buying the team. Can't do it at Penn State. Promise you that. We would not be able to get that done. I don't know who we'd even ask. I don't know who the famous Penn Staters really even are. We got some people, but man, we don't have that type of backing that Michigan has. I wish we do. We're not feeling that type of love in NIL, but I mean, look, that's where it's going to start to separate a little bit. If you have real money like that, where you have some of the biggest business owners in the world saying, "Hey, we got you. We'll back you with whoever you want to get, and if you think this guy is going to make the team great, boom, we're behind you." That's scary. I don't like that. It sounds like Michigan might not be down for too long. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And man, overall, the SEC bias as a whole has been, it's been something. You guys, I need to hear your thoughts on Booger McFarland. If you're in the chat at the moment, please let me know. If you watch the college football playoff ranking show on Tuesday nights, it is just an SEC. I don't even want to say it, but Alabama loses to 5-5 Oklahoma, and they drop 6 spots. Indiana loses to 10-1 Ohio State, and they drop 5 spots. How is that? How is that at all fair? Like the SEC, and then you got Booger McFarland going around talking about don't pay attention to the win-loss column. This SEC team is a lot better than they look. That's what he was saying after Auburn here went down and took care of middle of the pack SEC teams are chopping down supposed good SEC teams or elite SEC teams. So it's getting out of hand, the bias, and it's kind of funny just to watch. Joe said, who to thunk it, but the offensive line is going to be the strength of the offense next year. That's good news overall. Yeah, I did want to get into this. We're going to do something right now where we're kind of going to say leave or stay. And let's talk about the players that we think next year, where they perform right now. Are they going to leave or are they going to stay? And I think when you look at the offensive line, you're getting every single person back outside of Sal Wormley, who's in his 6th year. He's at right guard. I think he will go, which is okay because you have young Cooper Cousins, who's going to be a star. Put him at right guard, and then Nick Dawkins in his 5th year, but very well could come back for a 6th year. So you're right, Drew Shelton having a great year at left tackle. Hopefully Anthony Donka can get healthy, and Vanga Yawane also playing some great football. So you're right about the offensive line. Now, a couple other questions. Does Drew Aller leave? I think that is very possible, especially the way he's playing. Would he want to come back? And I think it all really depends on how the year ends. Really, I do. And Joe, I would kind of agree with you. And this is not at all inside information from Drew. I haven't even talked to him about this. But I would say I would lean towards Drew staying. I think, number one, he wants to graduate. I know his family definitely values that type of thing. And he's a smart kid. And I think, too, he knows he can definitely get a little bit better. And he has taken such a huge step this year. Can you imagine if he got to come back next year? I would love to see that. Obviously, Tyler Warren will go in the first round of the NFL draft. Enter in Luke Reynolds, Andrew Rappelier, Khalil Dinkins, superstars out the wazoo at the tight end position. Ty Howe is still doing his thing. And I always give credit to Tyler Bowen, who was the tight end coach here before Ty Howe, that got some superstars with Pat Freiermuth and recruited a lot of those guys, recruited Theo Johnson, recruited Brenton Strange, recruited Tyler Warren. So he does definitely deserves some love too. But it's more defense. We're going to be missing guys. I mean, defense is going to be brutal for us. Now, a couple big question marks. Deni and Zane Durant, I would say, are the two biggest question marks for me. If I was Zane, I would leave. And I know you don't want to hear that, but I think this is about his peak and just talking to some NFL agents. It's, at the end of the day, it's a size thing. And they want certain size, and Zane is considered undersized. And it is what it is. And they are always going to label him undersized. I don't think, coming back for another year is not going to make Zane Durant any taller. He's playing elite football. He should probably go. Now, would I want him to come back? Absolutely. But I think if Zane Durant does leave, on top of that, you have Hakeem Beamon already left. Devon Elise is in his 6th year, so he's gone. Then you look at a defensive end, Smith Vilbert's in his 6th year. Zariah Fisher's in his 5th year. Zariah Fisher will probably use his 6th year, if I had to guess. That'll be next year is the final year anybody will have a COVID year. So next year's guys, that's it. Then after that, no more COVID year guys. But yeah, our entire D-line's gone. Abdul's gone. And then, the big question for me is I think Deni will come back. I think Deni will want to come back for another year because I think he knows he can be a first-round defensive end. But because of injuries and just pass rush hasn't been as good, I don't think he would be drafted in the first round if he were to leave this year. So wouldn't be the worst thing for him to go ahead and come back. And then I think at a cornerback, we keep pretty much everybody. And A.J. Harris and Jalen Kimber, a couple guys, Zion Tracy, our DBs are playing pretty well. And then looking back at the safeties, you got KJ Winston. That's the big question mark, who obviously only played 1.5 games his entire junior year. Now, what's his situation? Does he want to come back? Does he want to play? I think that kind of comes down to his draft stock. So something interesting to keep an eye on. I would say Jalen Reed is definitely gone. He is absolutely out of here. Zakeem Wheatley will obviously be back. Kobe King's going to be an interesting one. Kobe King definitely is. I think he's kind of in the same boat, I would say, as Zane Durant. I don't think he is as highly rated as Zane Durant at middle linebacker would be. But I also think that Kobe King, it's kind of that same, how much better is he going to get? He is the player he is. He's a very good middle linebacker, run stuffer, and is going to be super physical. So that's something I'm keeping an eye on throughout the offseason. And we know we will get those posts, those posts where you see the player and it says Nittany Nation, and you can't tell until you read it, and you're rushing to the graphic to figure out, is this a I'm coming back post, or is this I'm thankful for the 3 or 4 years that I had here at Penn State type of post. So that's always something that it's kind of funny to keep an eye on. But yeah, that would be my guess. I think Kevin Winston has shown he's one of the most talented guys, and obviously his injury is going to knock him down a little bit, but I would still expect to see Kevin Winston Jr. leave, and I think that's all right. I think Zakeem Wheatley and Dejon Lane is that obviously a little bit of a step down from, say, Jalen Reed and Kevin Winston Jr. It is, but it's also a damn good safety group that Coach Poindexter is doing a really good job. And Coach Poindexter deserves some love. He is the safeties coach, and he's had some great guys, and he could have left for a couple different defensive coordinator jobs, a couple different even head coaching gigs, that type of thing. So deserves a lot of credit for that. We have some really good assistant coaches that could have went elsewhere, trust and believe. How many games did Luke Reynolds play so far? He needs to be redshirted. Luke Reynolds definitely does not. He's already long burned his red shirt because Andrew Rappelier was obviously going to be, it seemed like, number 2 really at the tight end position, and he got injured before Bowling Green. So Luke Reynolds definitely does not have his red shirt. And I don't think Luke Reynolds would probably be here for that long. I mean, you got to think Tyler Warren did a 5th year, barely. He did it. And Tyler didn't play barely at all. He didn't play at all his freshman year. And then in 21, when I got here, even his 2nd year, he was playing, but he was still tight end number 3. He wasn't that big a part of the offense. So Luke Reynolds, I expect to be the number 1 guy, and he has the most talent in that room, I think, from a receiving standpoint. But Khalil Dinkins blocks his butt off. So kind of need those guys to do the dirty work, the Brenton Stranges of the world. Let's see. Rojas will be the best player on defense next year. And I want to talk about Tony for a second. I think Tony was struggling for a little bit this year, as were most of the linebacking core to start the year. Kobe even started a little bit slow and has really came on. Dom DeLuca hurt his hand and was in a cast for a while, so he was playing with essentially one hand. Not very easy to be able to do that, and then had his pick last week, so cool to see him get that. But I definitely think that Tony has the ability to be one of the best players. He's one of the most athletic. Now, can he put that all together? Can he play sound football and find that mix of playing superhero football but also playing sound football? There's that mix you have to find as a player, because that's where Tony started to struggle a little bit this year. Was he was jumping in and out of gaps, trying to play Superman football and be the hero every play. Well, that's how you get burnt. So you kind of have to learn those lessons a little bit and understand when you are going to try to use the fact that you are more athletic than pretty much everybody else on the field. But I'm really excited for Tony's future. What happened to Elliott Washington? I mean, look, when Coach Franklin came out and said that there was 6 cornerbacks that he thought could start, and really, there's 2 or 3 on the field at a time. And so, stuff happens. People move around throughout the season, and Elliott played some at the beginning and hasn't been playing as much now. Elliott, actually, I think he had the first interception of the season against West Virginia. So he's going to continue to play, and he's actually one of the most impressive guys. When I was on the team, he was still a freshman at this point, and I remember he ran a 4.39 and then also benched 4.05. I'll never forget that. In the same 2-day span, ran a sub 4.3 or sub 4.4, and then benched 405 pounds. So he's a strong cat. He's got the ability, and that's why I think our cornerback group is pretty deep. For after last bowl season, we were coming away saying, "Oh no, I think we're screwed at cornerback." Coaches did a really great job handling that. Tony says, "How good do you think we could be next season if everyone returned that has eligibility left?" I know we'd be great. I think we'd be really good, but I think it's almost undoubtedly true that Abdul Carter will leave. I think Drew Aller will leave. I think Nick Singleton will leave. Jalen Reed will obviously leave. And then there's the big question marks for me are Zane Durant, denied Dennis Sutton. And then obviously, Katron Allen, what is he going to do? And so it's definitely some things to keep an eye on, but hopefully we can return a lot of guys. I would think the biggest thing would be trying to get Drew Aller to return. And that can't be easy, but trust me, I'm sure there is a NIL package being put together for Drew Aller to offer him to come back. Sure, it's lucrative, and it's not going to be how much he would make in the league, but that might not be necessarily what Drew Aller is fully concerned about. Like I said, there are people that really do care about getting that degree, getting that finished, and then continuing on. Robert Harbison says, "Congratulations on the degree, Landon." Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Robert. Broadcast journalism degree. I'm actually technically not graduated yet. I am graduating here weekend of the home game, if there's a home game. Hey, I'm not saying it's official yet, but I will be graduating that Sunday with a bunch of the guys. We actually just took our photos with Coach Franklin this weekend, and it was cool. But nonetheless, they might have a game on Saturday and then graduation on Sunday. It's going to be fun. And what that's going to be hell. Oh my gosh, for the parents of graduation. Think about that, because home playoff games here at Penn State, hotels, they do 2-night minimums. So if you're a family that wanted to come into town on Saturday and leave on Sunday for graduation, you can't do that. You got to stay for 2 days. So it's a little bit of a nightmare logistic wise, but should be nonetheless a fun weekend around State College. And I'll continue to air the Letterman grievances that we don't know if we will be on the sidelines. College football playoffs has completely changed the stadium operations. So when you go into the stadium, if you come to the game, you won't see any Penn State sponsorships. There will be no PSU, ECU, or no PNC, any of that Geisinger. It is completely college football playoff sponsorships, and the only thing that you get to keep on the field, or the only thing you get to keep, is on the field sponsorships, which Penn State does not even have. So some changes definitely coming for the college football playoffs. That is for sure. Someone said, Matthew John said, I feel like Washington was the best athlete on the team. He could definitely be in the conversation for that from a physical standpoint of his just strength and speed combo, but got to be able to put it all together. I mean, that's definitely something that you can't, there's always those players that they grab that's just athletic, and you just can't get them to actually play football all the way. And those are the special players, the Abdul Carters, who have football figured out and are also the most athletic guys. And it's a very rare form to be able to get someone that can do everything, but he, is definitely doing his thing. Joe said, Landon, give up your Honda sponsorship to Drew and get him 5 more. He'll stay. Why would anyone leave school if they're getting $2 million per year? No way I'd leave. Yeah, I mean, look, like I said, I think it's definitely leaning towards Drew Aller staying, in my opinion. Like I said, this is not off any, information that I have anywhere else. Just looking at him, and obviously, like I said, him wanting to be able to graduate, I think that is something. And then you're right, they offer him a really good deal. You get to be a kid for another year. I mean, that is something that people don't think about a lot. When you are going to the league, it changes. Football kind of changes completely. And now, I mean, we live in a different world in college football. You get paid. But once you start getting paid to play football, it's different. It doesn't feel the same. It's truly a job, and you're a grown up. When you're in college, even if you're a college football quarterback star, you're still a kid. You still don't have those same responsibilities. So trust me, that is something that is going through his mind and all of the above. You said because he is the best quarterback in the class. Yeah, I mean, look, and I think there's debate. I mean, Shedeur Sanders plays Big 12 defenses and Pac-12 defenses. So at the end of the day, I don't think the competition is the same. And it seems like Shedeur Sanders is being mock draft number 1 a lot of places, and that's where people think he will go. I don't know. We will see. And I think that this quarterback class as a whole is probably a little bit weaker than years past. And that's why the conversation for Heisman isn't really even with a quarterback. It's about a wide receiver / DB and a running back. So I think that can kind of just tell you how this is not a quarterback class this year. But I think Drew Aller could benefit from coming back. And I think even next year, quarterback class might be a little bit better. But I think Drew Aller developing, if he can continue to develop at the clip that he is now, who knows where he could be next year. And get him a wide receiver. That'd be something interesting. If I'm Drew Aller, say, hey, you got to go out and spend X amount of dollars on a wide receiver or something. Hey, it's a contract world now. That's where we live in. David said, thoughts on Nolan Rucci this year? Has he improved over the course of the year? I absolutely think Nolan has improved. And, obviously goes from playing left tackle to right tackle. It's not easy to bounce around like that as a lineman. It's like going to the bathroom with the opposite hand. It just doesn't work. It's not easy. It doesn't feel right. So Nolan's playing a lot of right tackle, and now Anthony Dunco seems to be down and out for the year. Nolan Rucci is going to be out there, and there's talk about a mixture of J.B. Nelson at right tackle with Nolan Rucci, but I think that is Nolan Rucci's job. He gave up a sack when he came in for Anthony Dunco last weekend, and it's just moving. He was moving a little slow. He did not fully he wasn't seeing everything like how he should have seen it. So it was just a little slower. But I think overall, his big thing was he was a big leaner in pass pro. He would always lean, and that would allow the defensive end to get around him. he's getting better at that, and his punch is getting better. And that's definitely a credit to him for the work he's putting in. But Coach Troutwine, you best believe Coach Trout is getting the guys right. Let's see, Just Joe, Drew, let's see. Don't shoot for 9 years of school like Sean Clifford. Hell, get him. Yeah, I mean, get him a couple. I mean, you're right. No, I mean, the wide receivers, there has to be obviously be a change because, I watched the tape. I put it out on Twitter. I put it out on YouTube from the Ohio State game. They took away Tyler and they said, hey, someone else beat us one-on-one. Let's see if your athletes are better than ours. And we couldn't do it. Like Drew Aller, there was questions of, hey, could he have led his wide receivers? Could he have thrown them open? Not really when they're just playing man coverage and they're on top of the wide receivers. There was not a lot of separation being created. And look, and we were still in that Ohio State game to the very end if it wasn't for 2 times inside the 2-yard line, come away with 0 points. You're probably going to lose that game. That's how it works. So get him a couple wide receivers. I hear you. We just lost the recruit. In the NIL transfer world, how much do signing day and commitment mean? How much does it vary between schools? I mean, look, where we're at now, a verbal commitment pretty much means nothing. It really never did, but it means almost nothing now, especially when you can throw $1 million at a kid, and best believe he will switch up if he wants to. So it really means nothing. And the interesting thing is that signing day has actually moved up because of the college football playoffs. They moved it up to December 4th. So guys will be signing about 15 days earlier than ever. My signing day was back on December 17th, I believe. So it's something to keep an eye on, but it varies. But it definitely varies between schools of losing guys and flipping commitments. But look, Penn State is offering education, history, and then there's NIL, but it's not as big NIL as other schools. And that's why we're a little bit further behind. I'll have to take a look at where our recruiting class is. I know it's gotten a little bit better. Obviously, just took a hit today with us losing our best player in the entire 2025 class. But I think we're still off to a good start. And we have some defensive ends in that class committed. We'll be all right. I think we'll be okay at defensive end. And Max Granville, as I said earlier, reclassified, so he will be here. Does Anthony Donka have a bigger upside than Olu Fashanu? He said Olu's a great pass pro and Donka a great run blocker. Yeah, so I think Anthony, if I'm giving you a true rundown, I think Anthony Donka is a little bit more stiff and not as fluid as Olu Fashanu. Now, Anthony Donka is one strong dude. It's fun to watch him run block, and I think you're right. I think at the end of the day, Anthony Donka will be considered a better run blocker, and Olu Fashanu will be considered the better pass blocker. Now, like I said, we'll see what happens with Anthony Donka. I think he can be close to an Olu Fashanu level, but that's pretty much the best tackle in all of college football. You got a little bit of a ways to go till we will give him that. So I like that, though. I like bringing up that conversation. It's a good comp. I gave that comparison because their careers started out eerily similar, where Olu Fashanu got his first start in the 2021 bowl game down against Arkansas because Rasheed Walker was injured. Well, this past year against in the Peach Bowl against Ole Miss, Anthony Donka didn't start but got to play most of the game for Caden Wallace at right tackle and played lights out. And Olu played lights out in his first start. So it's definitely similar career trajectories to start. We'll see how it finishes up. Howard fumble at the goal line made the game look close, but let's be real, we will take it. I mean, you can say that, but at the same time, like I said, you could say we were at the goal line a couple times, and one of the craziest plays I've ever seen with that Trey Wallace tipped interception. I mean, that was something else, man. If you watch in slow motion, people were bagging on Trey. There's nothing Trey could do. He had it in his hands, and then last second, the Ohio State defensive back pushed the back of Trey Wallace's hand just in time. The ball hits the back of Trey's hand and then kind of falls into the Ohio State player's lap. I mean, it was just crazy. So I think he is definitely – Trey Wallace is a good wideout, but I don't know. If we saw Ohio State again on a neutral field, it'd be fun. Offense, let's see. Joe said offense would have been much improved if Lambert Smith stayed. He is a very good year at Auburn. Look, Joe, you guys know I shoot you guys straight. I tell people all the time, and they're saying, look what Keandre Lambert Smith is doing. We had that same guy here. It wasn't going to work out. That's what it was. disagreements, and it was time for both parties to move on. I think that was pretty clear, and I think we're good. We're all right. Would we been a little bit better? Yes, maybe, but there's a lot of stuff that. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. I think both parties are happy with where they're at. Joe said, I'll support Penn State football as a fan as long as they play with heart. This is the first team since 2016 that did that. Yeah, look, I mean, this is a team that's coming back in a multitude of different ways. They've been tested all year. West Virginia, they were in the locker room for 2 hours, cramped up, come out, didn't miss a beat. Bowling Green, down 10 points, come back, handle that, win the game. Drew Aller takes a huge step forward as a leader, as a quarterback, as just a football player in general against USC, being able to dig Penn State out of a hole with his arm. We haven't seen that yet. And then fast forward, you got Wisconsin. Bo comes in, finishes off that game for Drew where we're down with Drew Aller hurt at halftime. Comeback, Minnesota, fake punt, 3 fourth-down conversions on the final drive to ice the game on our terms. This is a Penn State football team that plays with heart, and I'm excited to see them play. At the end of the day, they're when you have good leadership like that, it makes it easier. Because I'll tell you, like when you play on a team and you have one loss, and a lot of times it can be that Ohio State loss or a Michigan loss in the past, that can completely derail a season and just wipe out everything that you guys have built up to that point, really, because it all accumulates up. And one game, if it goes off the the tracks, and you don't have strong leadership to bring it back, guys will come in the locker room and they'll say, "Man, I don't want to do this today. I don't want to practice. Forget that." And it starts to get real negative. And I'll tell you, if everybody's getting negative and it starts to get accepted, that's when it goes downhill. And that's why you have programs like Maryland that we're playing this weekend that is just completely goes downhill. And I'm sure their locker room is fairly negative at the moment. And really, when you get to this point in the season where you're not playing for anything, aka, University of Maryland, who's 1-7 in conference play against us, it starts to become like, how quickly can this season be over? So you don't care about practice. You're just going out there just trying to get through it and get done. All right, let's take a break a little bit from talking about this. Here, we'll answer one more. David Butner says, with Ford getting hurt, is there any way to use Smith-Vilbert as a defensive tackle? Yeah, Smith-Vilbert's huge, and he just went back and forth from playing the 3-tech to playing defensive end. I think our defensive end depth is good enough, but they want him out there, and he has played a decent amount of reps. So I would expect us to keep him at defensive end because we're still pretty deep at defensive tackle, but Coach Franklin said he's going to be calling on a couple second-year guys to step up. So I probably would feel more comfortable with Smith-Vilbert out there. He's already made some impact. Let's jump over and let's talk about the college football playoffs for a second and really where Penn State stands, because the whole conversation of Penn State at number 6 is then at Notre Dame is at number 7. And people being the media, NBC perhaps, want Notre Dame to jump Penn State to the 6th seed and Penn State go back to the 7th seed. And it's just not as favorable of a route for Penn State if they were to get jumped. So I think if you're Penn State, you need to make sure that you handle this game against Maryland okay this weekend. Because I do think there's a scenario if Notre Dame is able to blow out USC, and we had an overtime game against USC and barely escaped, and we just barely beat Maryland by, say, 10 points, and it's not a convincing victory, I think they could flip Notre Dame with us. So I think it's very important that we get up and we have a strong lead against a Maryland team that, I'll just tell you, Maryland, it's the last game of the season, so they're going to come in, they're going to fling their body because who cares? You're done. And so guys are like, all right, let's just get after it. But they'll do that, but only if the game's close. If you get up by 2 touchdowns, they'll quit and they'll just be like, all right, this is our last game. As soon as this, the final clock hits 0, I get to go live my life for a couple months and not have to play Maryland football. That's what they're thinking. So just get up by a little bit and they will quit. They will be done. Trust and believe that. Now, like I said, you need to do that because right now where it sits, we play this number 11 seed. It's just more favorable. Indiana, Arizona State versus, playing an SMU. And I think there's a couple better teams. And we could play a million different teams. We don't need to get into the hypotheticals right now. The biggest thing about being 6 versus 7 is that second round. If you are the 6th team, you play the number 3 seed no matter what. That's probably going to be Miami as the ACC champion. Miami's a not great team. They've had some really close games with Virginia Tech and some other teams that they shouldn't have in that crappy ACC. Versus if you are the 7 seed, you play the number 2 team, which is most likely the SEC champion. So we're talking Texas or Georgia. I don't like that nearly as much if I'm Penn State. So normally it wouldn't matter that much, the 6 seed versus 7 seed. Who cares? The paths are just a lot more favorable for Penn State if they were to go the 6 seed route. Joe asks, so who will be the leader if Tyler and Drew both leave? I can't believe Drew is going to leave. He'll be on top of the world next year. He may leave. You guys are funny in the comments. Leaders step up. I'll tell you guys, when we got back from the Rose Bowl after we had PJ Mustipher, Jair Brown, Sean Clifford, the leadership was on a different level, and there's a reason we won that Rose Bowl that year. I remember 2 weeks later, we come back in and we have that first team meeting where it's cold out. Everybody's just kind of happy to see each other. You had the past 2 weeks off. And so we all sit, and you're all sitting in new chairs in the team room. And that's like the biggest, coolest thing, because when you come in, you're sitting in the same chair all year. And then each year you kind of get upgraded, like closer to the front of the room. So everybody comes in for that first meeting. It's like, oh, where am I sitting? It's cool, that type of thing. So I'll never forget, we come in after the Rose Bowl and I start looking around and I'm like, yo, who's going to lead this team? I'm like, those were like our guys. Like, that was the heart and soul, the seniors. What are we going to do? And then obviously, we figured it out and it was all good. But it's, you got to have strong leadership or else it's not, you're not really able to operate as an elite team. Someone will step up. I think Nick Dawkins definitely could stay. Anthony Donka, Drew Shelton. We'll have a pretty veteran offensive line next year. So I think there'll be a lot of guys to look towards to kind of look for some leadership. With Thanksgiving just yesterday, any funny offensive line eating stories you have at Penn State? Oh, man, we got some so many good stories. I'm trying to think. So the boys, we go out to eat pretty often. We move in packs. If you're an offensive lineman, you move in packs, and it's kind of different. So we've had a lot of nights at Texas Roadhouse in State College. Nothing too crazy. My favorite one is Nick Dawkins, actually. My favorite eating story. When we were at the Rose Bowl, me, Nick Dawkins, Olu Fashanu, a couple other linemen, we were all injured. And so, we're in there at halftime, kind of not messing around, but, just kind of doing our thing. And Nick Dawkins, you guys know him. He's quite the character, and he has little bites. When we go into halftime, you have a full just table full of snacks for the players to eat. And generally, they want the starters to eat the food. The starters never want to eat because they're currently at battle. And it's all the guys that aren't playing that want to eat the food because they're hungry, because they're just sitting there. So Nick Dawkins, next thing I know, he grabs about 8 pouches of little bites, those muffins that they come 4 in a pack. And so he gets like 8 pouches. And so he starts saying, all right, we're going to see how many little bites I can eat. My man Nick Dawkins put down 9 packets of little bites, 4 in each, in about a 15, 20-minute halftime period. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. And I've also went up against Nick in 2 eating competitions, lost both of them. So he's solid at that. Let me tell you what. But yeah, offensive lineman, you live in State College or any college town, you will see the offensive linemen moving around in packs, because that's just kind of how they move. MD is going to take the game off come halftime. Loxley will probably tap a keg of beer in the locker room. So I have a great Mike Loxley story. We got like 5 minutes left. This is from my Maryland story from the recruit era. So this is 2020, and after Maryland had beaten Penn State, that was the only time I think they've done it in the past 10, 15 years. And so Maryland beats us, and I remember I was real mad, and that was obviously not a great year for Penn State. So I get a call later that week from Mike Loxley, that was his first or second, I think that was his second year as the Maryland head coach, maybe first. And Tulia Tagovailoa, not Tua, Tulia is with him, and they're watching film from the Maryland-Penn State game. And he's FaceTiming me and shows me like the screen that they're on. And he's like, look at us whooping up on you guys. Sorry, team, saying all this stuff. And I was kind of, like, I wasn't a part of the team. I was committed. So I was kind of like, haha, laughing a little bit. But I'm like, yeah, that negative recruitment, that's not going to work. That never works well. And clearly it has not. Maryland is not. Yeah, Loxley is probably going to get fired after tomorrow. He should be. he just gets the benefit of the doubt because he's an SEC. He was an SEC coach. And look, he was my dog. He was a cool dude, funny dude. But it's like I said, I don't want to speak for. I haven't never played under him. I was recruited by him at Maryland and at Alabama. But he's, obviously doesn't get the job done. Doesn't run a tight shift over there, and that's what you have to do. You can't be the players' friends. Coach Franklin does a good job of that, of obviously being our mentor and being our coach, but not. You can't be too friendly in those circumstances. It starts to kind of muddy the waters of the relationship. Brian says, Landon, have you guys ever done 9 beers, 9 hot dogs, and 9 innings? Oh, man. I have not done that specifically. Fortunately, all the guys are still in school, so no story times on anything like that yet. But in the next couple of years, who knows what happens? Obviously, some good stories from the boys. I take it Jackson Smolik will probably transfer. Who knows? Looking ahead, but I mean, with obviously with we got a couple young cats, and I think that's an interesting conversation to have for next year too. Is if Drew does leave, is it Bo? Is it Crunkmeyer? What does that look like? That situation is their competition, and we've seen Bo succeed in situations where Bo Pabula has time to actually develop into an offense, and for an entire game, I'm speaking of, because he's had a lot of games where he gets thrown in for 4 or 5 plays total, and it is one play, and then he doesn't come back in for 35 minutes of like real time, not game time. Well, you can get real cold, and guess what? That it starts to really dictate how you feel about yourself. If you have one play for a whole quarter, and your whole emotions ride of how that one play goes, if you're Bo Pabula versus anybody else that gets to go out and play a couple series, and one play does not define how people look at your game or how you look at your game. But it does when you're only playing 4 snaps, that those 1 or 2 plays are a lot more important. So I'm excited to see how we continue to use him, but we've honestly found a lot more success in the Tyler Warren Wildcat quarterback than we have really in the Bo Pabula Wildcat quarterback situation. I mean, think even last week, there was a couple of times we brought Bo in. There was a false start. There was a couple negative rushes. So it hasn't always been great. And I think after the West Virginia game, the thought was, oh, this is gonna be easy. We'll be able to, use Bo and just sprinkle him in. It's gonna work great. It's gonna confuse the defense. Well, it hasn't really been that all the way this year. And I think a big piece of that is because when Bo comes in, it's like pretty much a guaranteed run. People know that it's going to be a run. So I think if Drew Aller comes back next year and you want to run something similar, when Bo comes in, it can't be 95% sure for the defense that it's a run. You have to have an element of to scare the defense that it could be maybe just a pass. So Aller, let's see, what do you guys got going on? If Drew leaves, Penn State becomes a RPO team that subs a passing quarterback every so often. Should work fine. Well, what's interesting, and I tell this to people, when you see his offense, Andy Kotelnicki's offense, when Bo Pabula's in that game, that trickery, think the second half of Wisconsin, where it was fun, it was confusing, it looked a lot of moving pieces. That is Andy Kotelnicki's true offense. That is the play calling that he has. That's how creative he likes to be. His offense with Drew Aller is actually an offense kind of tamed a little bit. It is kind of shaped a little bit to a pro-style quarterback of what Drew Aller really is. So it's funny you guys say that. I think you're right. That is a little bit more of what we will see, RPO, fun, creative trick plays that we saw with Bo Pabula in that second half of the Wisconsin game. But then kind of begs the question, do you want to go that route? Do you want to see what Ethan Grunkmeyer has? Because Ethan Grunkmeyer is somewhere in between both. I think he has an arm talent that could be comparable to Drew Aller. And I'm not just saying that. I've talked to their quarterback trainer, Brad Menler, who's someone that works with Aller and Grunkmeyer. And he said, hey, it's possible that Grunkmeyer could be more talented. So something to keep an eye on. Hope Coach K, UNC rumors are BS. Hey, Coach Kotelnicki's had a really great year. And I will say at the end of the day, it seems like his end goal is to be a head coach, which that always sucks with the coordinators when that happens. And that's kind of natural process. That's what happens. Coordinators graduate when they do a good job to being a head coach. But yeah, that would hurt with Kotelnicki. I like what he's done this year, and the criticism of getting too cute sometimes. Yes, I agree with that. But you take the bad with the good. So it's kind of something that you're okay with because of what we've really had past couple of years with Kirk Soraka and all that a non-explosive Penn State offense. So it's definitely continuing to get better. All right, we got about 20 seconds left. Guys, we are live every home game at Campus Stakes, Fridays at 3 p.m. So make sure you stop on by. We have a Toys for Tots drive where if you bring in a toy, you get 20% off of your meal here at Campus Stakes. So stop on by. Got some good French fries, onion rings. I love the cheesesteak egg rolls. That's my personal favorite here at Campus Stakes. So appreciate you guys tuning in. I have a pregame show that is up on my YouTube right now. If you want to go watch that, it was a little more concise. It's about 20 minutes, and it gives you all the information on college football playoffs and a little bit of Maryland preview that I didn't really get to in this. So you can go over and check that out if you want a concise little breakdown of the weekend. But if not, I will see you guys Sunday night I'll be live Sunday morning at 10 a.m. live at the student bookstore. So come on back. We'll be live on all platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Appreciate you guys tuning in today. Have a great rest of your weekend.